Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I am your host, Randi-lee. On today's episode, we're going to talk about something that is super important, and I don't think a lot of people know very much about it. We're going to be tackling some eating disorders, and our guest that's going to be sharing about her experiences with her eating disorders is Daralyse Lyons. Welcome. So welcome, Daralyse. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Randi-lee. I'm really glad to be here. This is great.
Awesome. So we are just going to start with a quick who you are. Introduce us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of known in industry circles as the transformational storyteller because I believe that stories have the power to transform lives, how we tell our stories, the stories that we write and create. So my name is Daralyse Lyons, and I'm the author of, I think, 20 published books.
Whoa,
now,
really?
Yeah. And I'm a journalist, I'm an activist, I'm a diversity advocate, and I just believe fully in the transformational power of stories.
Wow, 20 stories. So I have 3. Daralyse was so kind to send me 3 of her books, which I'll admit I have not read yet, but I am going to, once I do, check out my website because I will be putting a review on there for her. However, I have to say, just from looking at the cover and like the back of it, I'm pretty interested in reading them.
Oh, yay.
Yes. So yes, right now they are on my bookshelf and they will be read very soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. Just so you know, Randi-lee, I had nothing to do with the covers. I mean, I helped with with picking it out and stuff, but if I had to rely on my artistic ability, I would not, I would never, ever get anything published. So thank God for
That's
cover
hilarious.
Designers. Yeah.
And you didn't even have to admit that, and I would have never known the difference. So very nice for you to admit that to everybody.
Yeah.
So when did you start writing? If you've got 20 published books already, when was the first one?
Yeah, so I'm 37 now, and I started writing at age 5, but I will say that I spent many years kind of pursuing career opportunities that were not right for me. And so it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I left a financial career and I really began writing full time. So I'd say I've been doing it professionally for the last like 10 years or so, which is such a gift.
That's like 2 books a year.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but I think that people anticipate, right, that with writing, like you're supposed to be inspired or something, but that has not been my experience. I just write pretty much every day, and that has been the only thing that's allowed me to be very productive. And some days it might be 15 minutes and other days it might be several hours, but
yeah,
it's just become a practice and it's what I do. So it's,
which is great.
Yeah, I love it. I'm very
That's
grateful.
a big question people always ask. It's, what is your writing routine? And it's whenever I get to it. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Well, I definitely prioritize making time for writing. However, I'm not one of those people. I think it was Stephen King who would write from 9 to 5 every day or something. Like He would have those office hours and he would write and maybe contemplate what he was writing. And I'm not that focused. So I just write every day for like chunks of time during the day at some point, and somehow it comes together. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't do that. I mean, I write for a little bit, then I'm like, okay, it's homework time with the kids, right? And do that, and then go back to writing or do an interview, go do the dishes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. How many kids do you have?
So I have 2 teenagers and a grandbaby.
Oh, I love it. See, I don't know how anyone gets anything done with children. Like, I'm like, oh my goodness, how do you manage all the things? So,
yeah. That's a whole other show, I think. So let's get back to you.
Okay, sure.
Because that could take us down a rabbit hole. We're not going to go there. So we are going to talk about anorexia and bulimia, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So first and foremost, I mean, I think a lot of people have heard those terms, but I don't think a lot of people really understand what they actually mean. So can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say, just start off by saying that I'm in recovery from an eating disorder. And so I'm not like a therapist. I am not clinically qualified to diagnose anybody.
Yeah.
However, my own experience of being anorexic, so anorexia, has to do with food restriction or under eating, or sometimes, people will not eat for significant periods of time, but it really looks different for everyone. And I think sometimes when we get into like medical categorizations, it really takes out a person's lived experience of what it is to have an eating disorder. And so, and then bulimia is when people purge their food in some form or fashion. So that could be through over exercising, it could be through laxative abuse, it could be through purging with or without binging. And that was for me for many, many years. I've been both anorexic and bulimic, but I think the bulk of my eating disorder time was spent binging and purging, and it was a very violent way to live and very self-abusing.
Yes, definitely would be. With anorexia, now and this is obviously just an assumption from things that I've seen on TV for the most part, but probably like most people, we think anorexia is not eating, but you mentioned under eating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm not sure exactly what the, under what calorie limit you need to be in order to be qualified to be an anorexic. But yeah, I mean, if people don't eat at all, they would starve to death at some point, right? The body can only go so long. And so most anorexics, myself included, when I was anorexic, you eat a very, very little amount of calories, or eat, a fairly low amount of calories, but then exercise compulsively in order to kind of burn those calories off. So you're just living life at a constant deficit. And it's really painful. I mean, I'm not sure, Randi-lee, if you're familiar, you talked about reading online, but there was in Minnesota during World War II, there's something called the starvation study, where they put these, they took men who were conscientious war observers and who didn't want to be drafted, volunteered for this study, this medical study, and they cut their calories in half for a 6-month period, where these men just ate, half of what would be considered a healthy calorie range for themselves. And the men, all of them had like serious mental and emotional problems as a result of this caloric deficit. Many of them misperceived their bodies and started having a significant amount of body shame. One of them actually went clinically insane and had to be taken out of the study. Yeah, and these were all people who were healthy prior to. So our bodies really need adequate nutrition, and without it, there are serious detrimental effects. And so if someone's has anorexia, they're struggling, even if they might be eating something every day, or even, like eating, I think sometimes with like the intermittent fasting movements and different things that people do, they're operating at a deficit, and that can cause a lot of really painful consequences. And it doesn't take that long for us to start experiencing those things. So, our bodies really are meant to be nourished.
Yes. Yeah. Wow, that study is very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's really unnerving, actually.
It is.
Read about it.
I think I gotta look that up now.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I found very interesting was when you were talking about bulimia. Now, again, just the preconceived notion that bulimia was you binged and then you purged, but the purge was always making yourself vomit.
Yeah.
But you talked about over exercise as a way of purging.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And there's a lot of that. It's overwhelming. People who will maybe, have a binge and then go on like a 6-mile run to burn it off, or run, or it doesn't always have to be run, but exercise, when they're in pain and their bodies are, like screaming for rest, but they're exercising because they want to burn off calories or get those endorphins or whatever, that really, we human beings are so inventive and so innovative. And so we can come up with some pretty constructive, some pretty destructive forms of coping. And so eating disorders don't always look like we might expect them to look. People are suffering with any like age, weight, body size is not always an indication of whether or not a person has an eating disorder. People from all different demographics. I mean, I work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, there are people from all genders, all races, all ages, all life experiences. People develop eating disorders who are from, affluent families where everything looks really good on the outside. And people develop eating disorders who have a lot of trauma history, or maybe have don't have economic means, or whatever it is. Like it doesn't always look like we think it's going to look. It's really important that someone be able to kind of claim their pain for themselves and be honest about it and get help and support around it.
And that's why I'm so glad that you're here on the show, because we don't know what it looks like. Right? And whatever I've seen on TV about it is the cut and dry, you're either not eating or you're purging in the bathroom. Right? But you just explained so much more. And like you said, you're not a doctor or anything, but because of that lived experience, you have so much to share, which is amazing that you are willing to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
So when did you discover that you had an eating disorder?
Oh gosh. Well, I binged and purged for the first time at 14. And, I
young.
knew that something was wrong about that. Like, I don't think, I mean, I don't know, maybe people have had the experience of binging and purging and thinking that it was normal, but it's such a violent thing. Like, it's just, like, I kind of knew, okay, this is weird. Like, this isn't, there's something not quite right about this. And I had a lot of shame around it. But, early on, at least I had the illusion that I was controlling it. So early on, maybe I would do it like once a month or every 6 weeks, or just when I was experiencing a significant emotional problem or whatever. And so it was very sporadic. And then over time, it became a more and more addictive and then habitual force in my life, where I was just doing it all the time and could not stop. And it's really like any other addiction or compulsion, it takes on a life of its own. And then I realized that like I wasn't choosing it anymore. It was sort of just happening, and
it had taken control of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Did you hide it? Like, how did you hide it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know that I was ever very successful at hiding it. I was a very low bottom bulimic. I mean, at one point in my life, I would binge and purge 12 times a day. And I had a $300 food habit. So I would spend $300 a day on food that I was binging and purging. And so, I don't know that, like, certainly anyone who lived with me, I feel so bad for my college roommates, but, certainly anyone who lived with me kind of knew, like, okay, something is up. And the other thing is that I went to, I've been in 16 different inpatient treatment facilities in the course of my life. So, like that definitely makes people sit up and take notice, like, oh, well, you're going away for 2 weeks again. Where are you going? And you're coming back without a tan. And like, so.
Hey, to be fair, I go on vacation and don't tan because of the amount of sunscreen I put on. So it's possible.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it is. It's possible. I went on a lot of vacations though, and did not have a lot of like photographic evidence.
That one's harder to get by.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think I was probably not, I was never a very functioning person with an eating disorder. And that's been a real gift in my life, because I think many people sort of can function and, maybe they binge and purge a couple of times a week or a month or whatever, and they kind of live their life that way. But for me, I was either just in my disease or I've been in recovery. I've never really been a functional person with an eating disorder.
Okay. And how long was it before, say, like your parents or whoever took notice, right? Because you started at 14. So
yeah,
I'm assuming you lived at home still.
I did. I would have to ask my mom about that. I mean, I knew I think she knew fairly quickly after it started, maybe within a few months or a few episodes, like she knew that there was something fundamentally different about her daughter. But I don't know if she completely knew the extent of it or really got what I was doing until I was maybe 16 or 17. But I remember, I think also people who don't have this problem think that consequences are going to be enough to stop, right? Like that. So I remember one time when I was 14 years old, I had taken some diet pills. I had OD'd on diet pills, and I was like shaking, and I was having really bad physical reactions. And my mom called poison control, and they told her I needed to eat a piece of bread because it would like sop up somehow the diet pill, and it would like calm the energy down. Yeah. And I remember I just started to cry and cry and cry because I couldn't bring myself to eat a piece of bread, because in my head it was like too scary or something. I thought like if my choices are dying or getting fat, that was how I thought of it at the time. Yeah. From eating a slice of bread. Like then I'd rather die. And I just remember losing it. And I was like crying and crying and crying. And I just slumped down on the floor. And my mom like sat up with me all night, and she was just like pleading with me, to stop this behavior. And I think, after something like that, a person without an eating disorder is like, okay, that's a wake-up call. I got to stop this behavior. But for me, like, it's like any other addiction. It wasn't a wake-up call. So she thought, oh, okay, like Dara's had this really bad episode. She's promising me she's not going to do this anymore. And I meant every time I promised, I meant it. It's like I meant I didn't do it. I didn't realize it was a mental illness. And so, so something like that would happen, and she'd be like, okay, good. Like Dara woke up, she's got it. She's not going to do this anymore. And, but then I would, and then it would be, the next thing. And she was so wonderful. She took me to see eating disorder therapists. She would take me to different treatment facilities, and I just like couldn't get it. And I couldn't get better. And I just like, I lied about it a lot. And so I don't know. I think it was very, very hard. And she would try to like plead with me, and she would try, incentivize me, like, oh, maybe I'll buy you this if you can go like
all the parent tricks.
Yeah, all the parent tricks, and none of them worked. And actually, at 17, I moved out of my house primarily because I was fighting with my mom all the time because she wanted me to stop binging and purging, and I just couldn't. And didn't want to, and it was causing all these problems. And so the reason I moved out of my house at 17 was so that I could keep the bulimia going. And I did that. And so, I mean, I don't know that anyone would have been able to stop. It's again, like it's like any other addiction. It takes a person coming to a sense of realization of like, okay, I can't do this anymore, and I'm powerless over this cycle, and I need help. I need significant help.
Okay, so you've talked about going in and out of various recovery and treatment places.
Yeah.
When was the one that really stuck?
Okay. So this is probably going to be a horrible admission, but even after I got out of my last treatment facility in 2009, the end of 2009. But I still relapsed after that. I'd been in treatment for 9 months, and I got out, and like within a month I had relapsed again. And so I learned invaluable skills in treatment. I learned so many great skills and great tools, but it really took me just recognizing within myself that this is something I'm going to have for the rest of my life, and that I need to, continue daily practices, and I need a spiritual discipline. Like I need something outside of myself that's going to help me with this. And so it really took that. It took getting into yoga, getting into like deep spiritual practices, having a network of support. So it like, I wish I could say, oh yeah, I went to treatment and I was cured and everything was good. But the truth is that I think that I'm a the same wiring that made me think that it was a good idea to binge and purge. Like that's my wiring. Like it doesn't magically change because I went into treatment or whatever, but I found new ways to kind of turn that into creative outlets or helping people or work, like doing service work or those kinds of things, so that I no longer kind of get caught in that self-destructive loop, but I'm still the same person. If I'm not sure if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Makes sense to me. Hopefully it makes sense to everybody else who's listening.
Right. So like there's no cure. I don't believe there's like a cure necessarily, but it is possible to be in recovery. It is possible to like fully recover from an eating disorder. But if there's not a maintenance of that sort of like self-care or whatever it is.
Just like any mental health, right?
Yes.
That's just it. People need to realize that an eating disorder is under that big, broad category of mental health.
Right. I think the hard thing is, I remember I interviewed someone who's a fat activist for season 1 of, I do a podcast called the Demystifying Diversity podcast. And I interviewed this young woman and she said, like, people don't expect anxiety to look a certain way, and they don't expect depression to look a certain way. And so why do we expect eating disorders to look a certain way? Mental health issues are not diagnosable from how someone shows up to us. It's how they experience themselves. And that has really stuck with me. And so I think about that a lot. Like, I don't know what's going on for anyone except just what they tell me. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. So you talked about when you came out of the last treatment facility, right? And you relapsed, which was, a part of the process. However, you said though that you gained a lot of knowledge and insight and coping.
Yeah.
So
yes.
What kind of coping skills did you learn while you were there?
Yeah, great. So, between like the 1,000 hours of therapy at all the different treatment facilities, I think one of the things I learned, and it was so funny because at the very beginning of the interview, you said, thank you for being honest, right? When I said something about the cover, and I just thought, well, I have to be honest because I'm not a person who can have secrets. And sometimes that gets me into trouble because I'll overshare and people are like, okay, Daralyse, like, simmer down, but yeah, so I really learned that no one's going to be able to help me if I'm not honest with what's going on with me, with what's going on in my head, with what's going on in my behaviors. And so that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned in treatment was you're only as sick as your secrets. And so it probably took me maybe 3 or 4 inpatient hospitalizations to get that. But once I did, I stopped, I just stopped lying about what I was doing. And so then I felt like people could help me sooner, or at least I could understand like, oh my gosh, I'm caught in this cycle again. And I'm fully aware of what I'm doing and I'm talking about it. And so the honesty was a big thing. I think something else that I really learned in treatment is that I'm a person who is always going to need a certain level of self-care in my life. Like I used to work in finance and I worked for a hedge fund and we worked from like 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. And then you were always on call. Like it was just a lot. And
that's a lot.
It was a lot. Yeah. And for some people that's great and they thrive on that and it like feeds them. For me, it eats away at me to be too like hyper. And I tend to be a workaholic. So I really need to kind of check myself with that. And so I learned that about myself in treatment. I learned that I need to feed myself what I'm really hungry for, like on a soul level. And so that was part of making the transition from working in finance to being a creative person. I had to learn to like sit with my feelings, how to be real and vulnerable because I didn't know how to do that. Like there were just so many things that I needed to learn how to do. Also for me personally, and this is not true of everyone with an eating disorder, but just for me, there are certain things that like if I eat them, they really trigger me to like mentally,
What kind of things?
So for me, it tends to be a lot of the things that I would binge and purge on. And that doesn't mean I don't eat anything that I would binge and purge on, but like I don't have ice cream in my freezer, and just certain things like that, that it's sort of like, I just, like there's just,
I totally understand that. I understand that if it's there, I eat all of it. So
yeah, right.
yeah. You know, I tell my mom jokingly, but not 100% jokingly, that she's a snack pusher. She's finally stopped bringing so many snacks over, but if say she brought a bag of chips, I don't just eat one bowl, I eat all of it.
Yes. Yeah.
So like
yeah.
if I want a treat, if I want snacks, right, I'll go and I'll buy like the small bag. Because then I can eat the whole bag because it's portion sized already. But
yeah, that's true. And it's funny because like I think that about yourself, and so you can insert certain limits and parameters and like live within those. And someone like me, like I can have all that knowledge and still not be capable of like, okay, so I'll buy the one bag, but then after that I'm going to buy the second and the third and the fourth and the seventh and so just sort of like acknowledging my own humanness and the areas of my life that I really need support and like now, it's been a long time and I have a lot of freedom that I didn't have right when I entered into recovery for real, but I certainly do need to take a level of care of myself that other people might not have to.
Wow, so many interesting and valuable lessons that you've learned and that you've shared with everybody. Unfortunately, we're coming close to time.
Oh, no.
I know, I can't believe that it's already almost been half an hour, but maybe we'll have to have you, not maybe, we'll definitely have to have you come back on the show because I feel like we've only just started to scratch the surface of what eating disorders are about and coping and things like that. But what is something that you would tell somebody who is listening right now, who is dealing, maybe they don't even know that they have an eating disorder. Maybe they just feel like you did at the beginning, right? Where it was just, something's wrong, like this can't be right. What would you tell somebody?
Yeah, well, so I guess I would expand it beyond just people with eating disorders, but just, anyone in general who's dealing with any sort of mental health issue or behavioral issue. I think there's generally a voice inside of us that says like, I don't want to keep living this way, right? And so if there's something in your life that some part of you is saying, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to live this way, but I can't stop. Again, whether it be with food, whether it be with alcohol, whether it be with smoking cigarettes, whether it be with, just terrible depression, whatever it is, if your heart, if your soul is saying, I don't want to live this way, but I can't stop, I highly encourage you to seek answers and seek answers outside your own mind, because my mind is the source of my greatest pain. And so, whether those be spiritual answers or getting a great therapist or going to a 12-step group or whatever it is, like there is something that you're calling out for. And I think if you've been trying to solve this problem just on your own with your own mental resources and it's not working, seek something outside of yourself that can help you, and someone that you can trust to really be vulnerable and authentic with. And if it doesn't, if you go to one person and they don't get it, don't stop, find someone else, go to someone else, right?
I love
you deserve to be okay.
that. I love that you say that. I just did an interview yesterday with somebody and they were talking about how they found a great therapist. And I said the exact same thing you did. If the first one does not work out, go find another or another or another or another. Just keep going until you find the one that clicks.
Absolutely. I think therapy is a little like dating. Like you like
I love it.
You find love on that first try and it's great. And then other times like you just got to keep bumbling, it literally.
That's fantastic. I'm going to use that analogy from now on. Therapy's like dating. Excellent advice. Thank you. We're totally on the same wavelength there. That's great. So where can people find your books? And Absolutely. Is there one you want to highlight?
So I would say if they go to my website, daralyselyons.com, and that's DARALYSELYONS.com, they can find everything there is to find about me. So they can find my books, which they can purchase through Amazon. They can find articles that I've written, which are free. They can find links to my podcasts, anything. And there's also ways to contact me through the site or ways to engage on social media. So I would say go to daralyselyons.com, and I would love to hear from you, and or if there's anything I can do to enrich your life through my work. It's my honor and my pleasure.
Wonderful. And what is the name of your podcast in case anybody wants to listen?
Sure. So there's two that I have. There's the first one I did was the Transformational Storyteller podcast, which includes single stories of individuals, and that one's really powerful. And then the more recent podcast, which is my own personal baby with my business partners, Anna Marie Jones and Zach James, is called the Demystifying Diversity podcast. So if you check out the Demystifying Diversity podcast, that would be great. There's also a website for that, demystifyingdiversitypodcast.com, and you can find all our episodes anywhere you get your podcasts.
Awesome. And I'm assuming, Facebook, Instagram, all that.
Oh yeah, all the things. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the things. There's links available on either website. And so I
wonderful. Yes. So give Daralyse a follow on anything it is that you use. As well, check out her website, check out some of those books. Again, my review will be coming soon, and I will send it out to you. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing. Honestly, just like you say, you have to, because we got to be honest.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Randi-lee. It was a really wonderful experience.
I hope everybody enjoyed the show and learned something. And just like Daralyse was saying, we have to be honest with ourselves, because when we're lying to ourselves, all we're doing is lying to ourselves. And that's not going to help us get better. That's not going to help us overcome our mental health. And of course, the only way to end the stigma with mental health is to speak openly and honestly. So hit that like and subscribe button down below. Check out Daralyse's links that are also in the description down below, and give us a thumbs up, and see you on the next episode.